connecting to the internet.
Internet.
Networking software.
The World Wide Web thing in a computer today.
Computer.
NetSurfer Pro.
Hey, welcome back to NetSurfer Pro, a whirlwind ride through the World Wide Web. I am your tour guide, Matt Craig.
And I am your co-tour guide, Galen Wilson.
And it is the last episode of 2020. We've rung in the new decade with a pretty stinker of a year. And so we're hoping that the next year is a little better at the very least.
Yeah, it's we've had a terrible year here, but I mean, we can't say that everything is bad. You know, we have as of currently speaking, we have a vaccine on the horizon that is currently being sent out. We have a new president coming in, February, who will hopefully actually pass aid packages.
And we have a podcast, which is probably the least important of those.
Yeah. On a scale of importance and cultural impact, I would rate us below Elliot Page coming out as Trans Mask.
Oh yeah, congratulations to Elliot Page.
Yes, congratulations to Elliot Page. But like how below is like, up to viewer discretion, I would say. Some might say it's like, Elliot Page number 1 and then us number 2.
I do advise viewer discretion. Yes.
Please be very discreet when you're talking about this podcast.
Or shout it from the rooftops. Who do I care? It's interesting that this is our last episode of 2020 because 2020 was the 20th anniversary of what we're talking about. I've kind of been pitching this podcast as a guide through like 21st century media, and this just makes the cut by a year. It released in 2000. That's the point. Yeah. So, and actually, the day after Thanksgiving was the actual 20th anniversary. We're recording this way before you're hearing it, and also like a week after its actual anniversary. We are talking about Since I Left You by the Avalanches. It was released November 27th, 2000, the year 2000. Think about that. That was 20 years ago.
I don't want to think about that. That was 20 years ago, and it feels like it wasn't.
Right. It was, like early in the .com boom. Computers were steadily advancing as per, what's it called? Whose law is it? Anyway, whose law is it anyway?
Whose law is it anyway?
But like a lot of what we know of mashup culture wasn't really a thing, but it was present in the DJ scene at the time. And there are sort of a few DJs that are really well known for pioneering the style of what's called Plunderphonics, named because they would buy like record crates by the crate of just whatever they could find, and then take those samples, sample them, and mix them together to create new music. It's essentially the precursor to the modern mashup scene.
That, I have to say, brings into focus so many of the notes that I made for this album.
Yeah. And so Since I Left You was like a seminal work, one of the founding works in this genre. It was also, here's something I wanna run by you real quick while we're on the episode, is the fact corner.
The fact corner.
The fact corner, only facts. It's very short.
It's also the only part where facts are present in this podcast.
Yes. So the Avalanches were formed by Robbie Charter, Tony DeBlasi, and Darren Seltman, 3 people from just outside of Victoria, Australia. And they started as like a noise punk band that incorporated some vinyl sampling into their songs. But their drummer was deported during their their span as a band, and Robbie Charter got into the like cinema track or cinema program at a university, and at the university they had an audio lab, and since nobody cared about, or none of the students wanted to learn audio mastering, they all wanted to learn cinematography and direction, it was mostly empty. And so Robbie was able to piece together like a 30-minute demo, and then eventually their album, Since I Left You.
God, that explains so many other of my notes.
So, Since I Left You is made almost entirely of samples. I say almost because there's a few things that I'm not sure if they were sampled or if they were performed, most notably on the song Electricity. It's estimated that it's anywhere between 900 and 3,500 samples on the album, as per the two members, Robbie and Tony. They've kind of gone around those numbers in interviews over the years.
It should be noted, slightly depends on which version you're listening to as well.
Yes.
Because the main version that most people know, he said in a very non-hipster way, is not like the only version. There was also a version that had a lot more samples and an entire other song that was trimmed down, probably because of copyright and such.
Yeah,
and was only ever released in Australia, I think.
Yeah, it was a promo for an Australian radio station, and it contained, like you said, an entire other song, as well as a bunch of other samples that did not get cleared by the time of the album's release, including one from a Robert De Niro movie, interestingly enough. Also worth noting is that the name The Avalanches is from a then-defunct surf rock band, so they sampled the name of their band. They had gone through like 5 or 6 other band names before settling on the Avalanches. And then also, the album cover for Since I Left You is from a painting called, I believe it's the Sinking of the USS President Lincoln. So the album cover itself is also sort of sampled in a way. And it's notable that it's a ship on the album cover because of a little bit of a fun fact. The album began as a concept album. The story of it was that it was a man searching for a lost love, touring the world on cruise ships, and like the person he was chasing after would always be like one step ahead of him. This was eventually dropped, but there are still sort of whispers of that story throughout the album. And we can get to that in pretty much now. I mean, that's all the facts I have.
Yep. So do we want to go ahead and start with just the title track of Since I Left You, first track on the album?
Yeah, sure. I want to mention Since I Left You is where one of the prominent differences between the album versions comes in. The promo version had a much longer intro that had a sample where somebody says younger than springtime. And in the final release, that's skipped over and it just crossfades a little quicker.
Yeah, the widespread release has a whole lot less clips in the very beginning, but it still ultimately sounds similar. The actual songs themselves don't have like too many specific sampling differences when you get really down to the brass tacks. Yeah. So either version of the album is very worth listening to. So Since I Left You, it's a little hard to explain the sound. I would describe it as very 70s dreamlike. It sounds a little bit like The Hustle. It has a lot of orchestral splendor. It has a lot of choir sounds. It's very upbeat. The like title sting is Since I Left You. So here's a little fun thing I did in writing down my notes. I haven't looked up the actual lyrics of the samples. I've simply written down what I hear.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I had found that a lot of what I thought I heard was actually really wrong. Yeah. Because I looked up the direct samples during the note writing process.
Yeah, so if this might be a fun little game we play, so for example, the title sting of Since I Left You is from what I heard, hi dog.
Dog.
Little dog, little jingly necklace dog.
This one's staying in the recording.
Yeah. Her name is Didey. She's wonderful. Oh. What I heard from Since I Left You is, since I left you, I found the world something new. And every day I do not know what the actual middle part is. It's pretty obvious, Since I Left You and Every Day.
Yeah, I believe it's I Found the World So Blue.
So Blue. That makes a lot more sense.
Dabba dee dabba die. Yeah.
Uh,
So it's funny that you mention like the sound, because I remember when I was reading about like kind of the history of the album, there was some music journal, I don't remember which one, that at the time criticized the album, calling it sound string section disco. And I think that's a beautiful description, because to me that does sound like a really cool genre I'd love to listen to. That sort of idea of like, it's like classical sampled instruments, or sampled classical instruments with like disco beats and drums and like more dance style of the arrangement.
Yeah. The one of the big overall notes I have is that so many songs and sections of songs, which we'll get into a little bit later, sound like they have the like movie style backing tracks of the early 20th century, so like 1930 to 1950, mixed with later like actual music from the 70s to the 80s. I don't hear a lot of 90s, but like string disco sounds so perfect to describe it, because that really does describe a lot of the individual songs, where like in Since I Left You, there's the the song that Since I Left You transitions to, Stay Another Season. It keeps some of the orchestral soundtrack sound, but it starts mixing in a kind of like Latin American dance, like salsa sort of beat, when it gets to the like when it starts getting into the actual song itself.
Right.
And it takes the grandiosity of the movie soundtrack, and it warps it into a dance track.
Right, yeah. Stay Another Season is kind of notable because that actually has a sample from Madonna on it, from Madonna's Holiday. So that's like one of the big name samples that they included. Most of the time they try to go for like really obscure samples, and you can definitely tell that because it's hard to tell what some of the samples are. But every now and then you'll get like a faint, glimpse of something more notable.
Yes,
And it's really just a byproduct
exactly,
of their process.
I know exactly one sample that I heard and could immediately point, and I was very proud that I could, and we'll get to that much later. It is later in the soundtrack.
It's on my favorite song. Yeah, so the other thing about Stay Another Season, so this is where the other major difference is track 3 on the original, on the final release is Radio. In track 3 on the original promo release was With My Baby, which was cut later on. There's like a more smooth transition between Stay Another Season and With My Baby than there is for Stay Another Season and Radio.
Yeah.
But what I really like is there is a horse sample that appears on Stay Another Season of like a horse kind of whinnying. And that transitions to With My Baby much better, because With My Baby is a song that's very like frontier, not the other Frontier song, but it parallels that Frontier song in a way.
Yeah, it has some of that Western steel guitar.
It has like the whistling from, what is it, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah,
it has a similar style of whistling.
It also has, I think I noted down like ramshackle sound With My Baby for clarity, where like a lot of the percussion sounds like you're tapping on like glass bottles or metal, or you're tapping on something that you would find and not something that you would like play.
Right. So yeah, Stay Another Season is an example of like a transition song. Every song flows into one another. It's like a complete DJ set. And so sometimes there are songs that are like, less than a minute long, because their purpose is more to smoothly flow between other like singles or main songs.
Yeah, and another through line is that a lot of the individual tracks actually kind of have their own specific their own specific transitions as well. So like Radio flows into my favorite song of the album, 2 Hearts and 3/4 Time.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk a bit about Radio in a little bit as well. We'll talk about Radio after this. But 2 Hearts and 3/4 Time has like a 20-second intro, then a, minute and a half of the main song itself, and then like 40-second outro.
Yeah.
Where it's basically a completely different song. But then that outro transitions into Avalanche Rock, which is the next song.
Right. Yeah, so Radio is one of the more electronic songs. It has like a, I don't really know how to put it. It's just like this wobbling sort of synth that's like wow, wow, wow.
Yeah,
something like that.
I think Radio has my lowest point of the album, which is the chiptune-ish beats in the midpoint are like very harsh.
Oh yeah.
Like there's little beeps beforehand that are part of the first half of the song, but then there's like a little beep 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 that sounds like the chiptune equivalent of like chipping off a nail or something.
It's like if you were to take Birdsong and run it through the Sega Genesis sound compressor they use for the Sega like title.
Yeah. It's very harsh, and it works all right as a tune, but the actual instrument itself is just very harsh and jarring.
Yeah, see,
in a way that drags me out of it.
Radio is one of my least favorite songs because of that, and because of the ending, where there's somebody saying, "Oh, can't you hear it?" And it's just like repeated over and over again with very little other sound to it. It just like fills me with dread.
Yeah.
But there is the great sample of somebody going, "Money."
Yes, money is very good.
And then it transitions to 2 Hearts and 3/4 Time with like an explosion of sound.
Yeah, that it slams you with an ooh, yeah, oh, yeah. And it punches you with that sound for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, but then it shifts completely. I mean, first of all, it shifts to 3/4 time, which is kind of great.
Well, to be fair, the ooh yeah is also in 3/4 time.
Yeah. But it also transitions into a very soft song. It's like a very nice, angelic kind of, light choir, not choir, but like light music, with a single voice at first doing like a la da da la da da la da da. It gave me the like audio visual of like sitting at a beach,
or like a meadow.
Yeah.
Or like that Manet painting.
It's very calm.
Yeah.
Isn't it Monet?
Is it Monet or Manet that did the Sunday afternoon or whatever? The one with the people at the picnic near the riverbed?
That's probably Manet.
That's what I was thinking.
Monet is I think the musical artist.
What? So
listen, this isn't the fact corner. I can't say anything factual.
All right. So yeah, 2 Hearts and 3/4 Time goes on like that, and then it gets interrupted sort of by Avalanche Rock, which is
it gets really discordant near the end.
Yeah. It has another sort of loud whistling to it. That does go away when Avalanche Rock kicks in, and Avalanche Rock kind of just immediately switches to Flight Tonight.
Yeah, Avalanche Rock is 24 seconds long.
Yeah, it's a very quick transition song. Now, Flight Tonight's interesting. Other than having like this really powerful beat to it, it actually features rapping by DJ Dexta, who does the scratching on Frontier Psychiatrist. Really? And toured with the Avalanches for a while.
That's awesome, actually.
Yeah. Now, I believe that the actual like rapping by DJ Dexta is itself sampled from like a freestyle. but it is interesting that it's included there.
Yeah. I like Flight Tonight, and I like Flight Tonight a lot for a very specific reason that also kind of encompasses the album as a whole. Flight Tonight, among any other song on the album, sounds like the kind of song that would be on the SSX3 soundtrack. I'm not going to clarify like what SSX3 is or anything for those who don't know. Google it. That might be its own episode. Don't know. But the point being, it has that sound of like a semi hip hop, semi punk, like semi rap track that is high energy, but not overwhelmingly high energy. And also the way that it like dips in and out and kind of, occasionally mutes and then comes back in. It has that style of the SSX3 rolling soundtrack. That's not the name for it, but the soundtrack that will like mute audio or mute, sound more blown out depending on what you're doing. It's something very specific to me and what I like, but it's something that I notice a lot through both Flight Tonight and a lot of the album.
Yeah. I just think it's always stuck out to me with how just like powerful the percussion is, but also how repetitive the song is. Like there's the one sample of like Need to Book a Flight Tonight that repeats over and over again as sort of the through line of the song. And it almost just like, I almost like to think to myself, like, who is this person that keeps repeating it to themselves that they really need to book a flight tonight? I really hope they booked their flight. It sounds very important. But that's also like why I could see it also being on like a sports video game, is because it has that sort of repetitiveness to it. But it still plays with like when it brings in and out the samples, like you said.
It's repetitive, but in a way that you don't get tired because it is still shifting. Yeah. Which is not something that every song does. There is a song a little bit later that I don't like because it doesn't change up enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so after that is Close to You, which is my personal favorite song. It has like 3 songs in one song.
Yeah.
It starts with like coming off of Flight Tonight, it starts kind of busy, and then it has this like syncopated flute on it. And then there's like a dip for a little bit of like a more calm part. And then that goes into the main like dance beat part, which is another one where like it has the like, well, yeah, it has the beat of like a dance song, and it has like organ almost, like the type of organ you'd hear at like a baseball game.
Yeah, I specifically noted that it has kind of organ-ish music, like a little bit. It's a bit after one of the stings. I think when it starts going to the turning the junk upside down part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Disco is also like very, what I think one of the lyrics is something about like stop to the disco.
Yeah,
and
it's like
a very
stop
good way to
the
describe
midnight, go into the disco.
Yeah.
But this actually has kind of a joke on it. There's a part where it says stop to the midnight, stop. And then after it says stop, there's like this tire screech. And all the other samples get kind of quiet, so you can only really hear the tire screech. That is like the type of audio comedy that like Neil C. Ciorega does. Of like taking samples and juxtaposing them in a way where it has like a surprising outcome. It's not necessarily a setup and a punchline, but it is like you hear the word stop, the music stops, and then you get this image immediately of a car suddenly stopping. But after that it goes into like the sample where it says the gentleman that's going around turning the club upside down. That just kind of goes on for a few seconds or so.
For those wondering, the lyric that I have is Stambo man that's going around turning the junk upside down.
Nice. Yeah. But yeah, in that's sort of what I mean by it has like 3 songs. Is each of those 3 points like the busy part at the start, the dance part, and then this part at the end are all feel very distinct, but to me they don't feel that different. Like there's a clear flow between them.
I believe the transition from Close to You to Diners Only is also another point where there's some differences.
Yeah,
because I believe that there are more voice samples in Diners Only, the intro.
right. Yeah, in Diners Only, in the promo version, there is a sample from a De Niro movie where he says like, "I'll have one of your finest champagnes," but that part is not in the final release. They skip over it.
Yeah.
But luckily it takes up like exactly one bar, so or one phrase, so it doesn't feel out of place.
I like Diners Only because it's very transformative of the immediate previous song. It takes the sort of outro sting of Close to You, the like bum 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 bum. I can't remember what the actual sting sounds like.
Boo boo. That
yes,
part.
That's it. Yeah. And it turns that into like it rolls with that little do as a much sort of calmer tone until it gets percussion halfway through. But like it mutes that and puts it in its own song.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very I would honestly say that if I really had to criticize it, I would honestly say that the original version that doesn't have the champagne line makes a little bit more sense, just because it feels like you've just stopped for coffee in the middle of a song.
Yeah.
When it gets to that point. And so the addition of champagne is like, I would say that doesn't fit.
Yeah. If you can't tell, there's a lot of like very distinct imagery that we're getting of like physical places that I think this album does a great job at conveying. The song after Diners Only is A Different Feeling, which is another sort of longer one. It has a much louder and more like direct synth as sort of the lead melody.
Yeah.
That keeps getting repeated with like a few vocal interludes between now and then. And I have to ask what your supposed lyrics are for this.
The supposed lyrics, the only one that I have written down is tell me, tell me's in love.
So that's actually Tammy. And after
Tammy's
that,
in love.
there's a little vocal sting that happens before it goes back into the synth, which I have no idea how, like, it doesn't sound right to me when I listen to it, but it's supposed to be like, find a way to care. I always thought it was can't find my ticket.
Huh.
Because it just, like, they start and end the sample not on the measure of the original sample, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The song it was sampled from. So it's like if you were to take, the third beat of one measure and the second beat of another, and that's your new measure.
Yeah. Is this before or after the part at like 2:30 that kind of sounds like the tornado in Wizard of Oz?
The tornado in the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
I mean, this just happens after every time the Tammy sample is used.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean. There's like a violin part.
Yeah, it's like very foreboding, and it's a very foreboding violin section that it's not as upbeat as the actual tornado part in Wizard of Oz. The da-da-da-da-da-da. But that's what I always think about, because it's very like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's very, it's in a negative key, and it's sort of again foreboding.
Yeah.
And that's all I can place it as.
It's interesting. So towards the end of A Different Feeling, there's like I want to say like a sitar or something similar going into the next song, Electricity. And I always felt like, I always got like the ship imagery of like A Different Feeling is like a ship going through a storm, and then that sitar is like the calm at the end of the storm as they're arriving to their next destination.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's intended, obviously, but that's just what it gave off, is like a sort of like very difficult portion, and then it calms down into Electricity, which is, there's a little bit of an interesting history behind it in that it was made as a single. It was like the first song they made, and they weren't even going to include it on the song until like towards the last minute.
Huh.
So it's interesting that A Different Feeling and Tonight could have been adjacent in terms of the track listing. They could have been sequential.
Yeah.
But Electricity was put in there, and I think it's really cool. It's one of the most... It's another one of the more, like, electronic songs by today's standards. It has, like, some sort of synth going on. I want to say, like, a saw or something.
Yeah.
As, like, the main melody. And at the start of it, it has opera vocals from an Australian opera singer.
That's why it's that. Again, note on paper, starts like an opera.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, pat yourself on the back. That's like the one that I don't know if that was sampled or if that was recorded for the album.
Yeah.
Yeah, Electricity is just a fun song. It has this really cool bass line.
Yes.
Throughout sort of, I want to say, the chorus in a way.
I have kind of the least to say about Electricity, but that isn't because it's a bad song. It is a very fun song that I can't majorly analyze.
Yeah. I do like that the start of it during the opera singing has like this plucking that builds up in intensity, and then, you know, the drop happens.
Yeah. The one of the only notes I have is that the very last transition that I can't place in my head currently, to me sounds like it's about to transition into a few of my favorite things for some reason. The one song from
Sound of Music.
Yeah, that one.
You know what's funny?
I don't know why.
A few of my favorite things is sampled on their second album, Wildflower.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it goes on to Tonight, which is a really weird song.
Yeah, so Tonight May Have to Last Me All My Life is my least favorite song on the album.
Even
But
least favorite than Pablo's Cruise.
I like Pablo's Cruise.
Well, more power to you.
As much as it's out of nowhere. So here's the thing. I Might Have to Last Me All My Life it sounds like 50s lounge music, where like there's a full piano section and then there's a like more muted section that is a woman singing Tonight Might Have to Last Me All My Life, and with a sort of discordant piano transition between the two. But the problem I have with it is that it transitions from piano to lounge music to piano to lounge music to piano to lounge music at least 3 or 4 times, and it doesn't really change anything.
Right.
It doesn't like add anything. It's just sort of it's literally just repeating.
Right. It's not like Flight Tonight, where like it kind of juggles the samples around, but is still kind of repetitive. It's just repetitive. It kind of adds on piano towards the end, but not much. To me, what always gets me about it is it's, like you said, very discordant. It's like every other song on the album sounds dreamlike, and this one sounds nightmarish. Like, not like a nightmare where you're in terror, but a nightmare where just something is a little off.
Yeah, it sounds to me... It is my least favorite track, but I think something interesting is that it sounds like a record literally on repeat, like a record literally kind of skipping back to the one section. And I think that adds to the song put into a bubble, where like the idea of it is Tonight Might Have to Last Me All My Life, and so it is literally repeating Tonight Might Have to Last Me All My Life. It's literally repeating the two samples as a sort of like, almost as if, you know, whoever is singing it, whatever the song is gripping onto that last moment. whatever that may be. Maybe it's the last moment of happiness, maybe it's the last moment before they die, who knows. So like put into a bubble, this song is interesting, does do something very neat, but as a whole album, I skip this song every time it comes up because I don't want. The rest of the album is pretty like fun and vibing, and I do not want that to. I don't want to harsh my buzz.
Right, yeah. It's like everything before and after it is like a party, and this is just like, eh. It depends on if I want something to like really focus on, or if I do just want good listening or like easy listening. Good, easy listening.
And then we get Pablo's Cruise.
Yeah, which is boat sounds and then another baseball organ.
Yeah, the lyric I have for this is seagull noises.
Yeah, seagull noises and foghorn.
There's like a very brief circus-y kind of section. I'm not sure.
Right, it's from a 4th of July related record. Of like 4th of July songs. I don't know. But yeah, it's that sort of organ you would hear playing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," except it's not. It's just that instrument.
I'm for a second I misinterpreted and thought that the boat sounds were a 4th of July record.
No, I mean they could be. I don't know.
Hey,
actually,
Timmy.
no. I think they're literally a record of boat sounds. If I remember the video I saw correctly. I want to mention,
Dad,
by the way.
Yeah. Dad, can we listen to some music? No, we
boat
are a
sounds.
boat sounds family,
Boat sounds and 4th of July music.
and that's it.
I want to mention that the album liner has samples like attribution on it, but the text you basically need a magnifying glass to read some of it, and even then there are a lot of uncredited samples. So like being unsure about some of the samples, I don't even think the members of the band remember what all the samples came from, given the 2,600 sample difference between their estimates.
Yeah.
So after Pablo's Cruise is Frontier Psychiatrist, which may be the most well-known song on the album. It was their second or third single released. It has a music video, which is a pretty good music video. It has the most prominent turntablism, or like the most prominent scratching, which again is because DJ Dexta specifically did scratching on it. Something kind of fun in the music video of this song, there is a giant replica of the album Ski Surfing, which is by the original band, The Avalanches. The original Avalanches was a surf rock band. And so they kind of pay tribute to that in the music video for Frontier Psychiatrist.
That's very fun.
The pretty much all the main lyrics that talk about the Frontier Psychiatrist and all the stuff about Dexter and all that, those are all from Dexter. Huh, that's funny. Those are all from Wayne and Schuster sketches. There are two specifically. One of them is Frontier Psychiatrist, and the other is like I Was a Teenage TV Addict. And interestingly enough, the radio sample at the start of Radio is also from that sketch.
Interesting.
So it's another sort of like repeated sample or repeated source. They really make use of their samples. There's a few other like records that appear throughout the album.
Do you know what that sketch thing is? Like, is it sketches of? Is it like, sketches in the sense of Abbott and Costello, or like a radio play?
I mean, the video I saw that was going over the samples from the album had video of the sketches. So I assume it was TV. Yeah, it's not, they don't only sample records. There is a movie called Club Med that is sampled many times throughout the album.
Interesting.
And I'll talk about that a bit later when we go over sort of the album as a whole.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Frontier Psychiatrist is absolutely a bop. It's not even a criticism, it's just that like Frontier Psychiatrist, if you have only listened to it and not the rest of the album, it gives you a wrong impression of the album as a whole, because it is the only song that has the sort of like kind of sentence mixing ish, and like you said, it has the most prominent scratching on the album, and it's extremely good and absolutely deserves to be, probably the most well-known song of the entire album, but it isn't indicative of the album as a whole.
Right. I think the sentence mixing is interesting, because that's like something that I feel I always attribute to more modern music, like post 2010. That, like, especially with mashups and stuff like that. I mean, you look at things like the Knuckles from Knuckles and Knuckles featuring Knuckles from the Knuckles May Chuckle series.
Yes.
Or the DK rap edits people have made, where like they're very heavy sentence mixing. And this is like the only album, or the only song that uses it to this extent, where it creates new phrases from like multiple sources. But I mean, yeah, it's done well, I could say. I just think it's interesting that it only appears on one song, really.
Yeah. Speaking of appearing, though, we do get the horse once again.
Yes. The horse sample reappears in Frontier Psychiatrist, which since it didn't get the context from With My Baby, then it gets the context here. Also, With My Baby was a B-side to the Frontier Psychiatrist single in some releases, apparently. I don't think it was in every release of the single, but I've heard people say it was a B-side, which would make sense because they're very similar.
Yeah.
They both give me the image of the Old West. Yeah, that's sort of an interesting way to look at them. After Frontier Psychiatrist is Ito, which is maybe my third or fourth favorite song in the album.
Ito is... I have very little notes for Ito, but it is... Again, it's pseudo repetitive, but it does things with the repetitiveness. Because if I remember correctly, the actual only quote unquote lyrics are kind of somebody saying Ito, 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 Ito.
Right, and then there's Massachusetts Institute of Technology, home of complicated computers that speak a mechanical language of their own.
But it's basically just Ito.
Yeah. Ito, I really like because it starts with kind of just a few samples, and then it just steadily increases the like just quantity of samples. It's very similar to the starting line from Mouth Moods in that regard.
Yeah.
And then it kind of releases it with, sort of a drop in a way, but not really. To me, Ito is one of the most dreamlike or mystical to me. Part of that's because it literally has an alarm clock that appears throughout the rest of the album from this point. But it's really prominent here as just like part of the music. There's also like, I don't think it's necessarily a snare. It's like a cymbal crash that keeps playing, or just not really a hi-hat, but there's like a constant cymbal playing. There's like chimes. It also has a sort of syncopated flute at one point. But yeah, like it to me, this is the one that feels the most like it reminds me of like a rainforest. If we're going with visual metaphors for how the songs feel, this one feels like a rainforest or a rainforest cafe. I can just picture somebody like pushing their way through trees and underbrush. Yeah. Well, it's wet. It has a wetness to it.
And also there's a cafe.
Right. Also, so I mentioned the MIT sample. That is one where I can't remember if people have found it or not, but it's not one that's credited on the album liners. And there are a dedicated group of people who are trying to find every sample on the album, which is very hard. But I remember like reading about how they tried, first thing they did was they tried emailing MIT and they didn't have it. And it turned out it was actually from like a tourism like record. like advertising MIT in Boston. So they had to like call the like Massachusetts like Board of Tourism or whatever to track down the sample.
Yeah.
Also, Ito is most likely named after their drummer that got deported, Manabu Ito. So yeah,
That makes the name make a lot more sense, because that is probably the only name that I was ever actually curious about. Everything else has a semi-standard name, even if it isn't obviously super explicit in why it has that name. Ito is the only one that has something so obtuse, I would say, but that context makes it make a little bit more sense.
I think not knowing what the name was helped make it feel sort of dreamlike to me, but I feel like it's rude to say that now that I know it's named after a person.
That's valid.
So after that is Sacred Crane?
Summer Crane is
Summer
what
Crane.
I have.
That's it. Sacred Crane, I think, is some Yu-Gi-Oh card. Yeah, I don't have many notes for Summer Crane myself.
I have none. So do we want to talk about Sacred Crane, the Yu-Gi-Oh card?
Summer Crane is just it's like that, and Little Journey and Extra Kings, which all kind of round out the end of the album with one more song. They all kind of blend together for me because they use a lot of the same samples.
Yeah.
They use this like, it almost reminds me of like an old Disney movie from like the start of their colored animation. It has like sort of a humming to it. But yeah,
yeah, like Summer Crane and Little Journey and Extra Kings to some extent as well sound very travel focused.
Right.
They sound like they seem to tie back to the original concept album idea of somebody traveling port to port.
Right. Summer Crane makes me think of another field one, maybe with like a wedding instead of a picnic.
Yeah.
But then yeah, Little Journey, it has the sample where it says take a little journey, but then it kind of gets interrupted by this like newsreel string sound. That's the best way to put it, is like if you're watching an old movie from like the 60s and like a newspaper gets pressed against the camera and it says like, this just in, so and so loses the election or whatever. It's like that's the sound they would play to signify this is urgent news.
Yeah.
And then that
I think really does work well to describe it.
Yeah.
It is very funky, because it is also going into the next song, Live at Domino's, which is really good.
Right. So I just want to say, for me, I feel like I'd rather listen to just that part of Little Journey and then Live at Domino's. And likewise, I'd rather listen to Electricity if I could listen to just the like sitar part at the end of the previous song.
Yeah, with the overlapping, this is a strength and a weakness of the album, is that you will find parts of songs that you like more than like the entire song, and you'll also find parts of songs that you dislike more than the entire song. Like Love in 3/4 Time, I love. It's my favorite song on the album. I would also say that I genuinely kind of wish that the last part that goes into Avalanche Rock was just part of Avalanche Rock.
Yeah. So Live at Domino's is
the
climax.
This is the only sample I know. This is the only one I could pinpoint immediately. The opening beat, the opening guitar sting is from Ma Baker by Boney M.
Nice. Yeah.
Boney M, of course, being the people who made Rasputin. Rah, rah, Rasputin,
Yes.
Russia's greatest love machine.
So it's funny you mentioned that. I thought you meant the Gentleman That's Going Around sample, because there was a time where you messaged me to look up a song that you heard on the radio, and it was the sample, like the song that sample was from. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that. It was like in high school.
Yeah, I don't know if I remember that at all.
But yeah, so Live at Domino's, it's it reminds me of Skrillex, and I mean this in a good way, but like structurally it reminds me of that. It has like really quick and sudden changes between samples in like the verse part, sort of.
Yeah.
There's like a pattern that plays through them even though they are very suddenly changed. It's like less crossfading and more just adding a sample
more
in.
just yeah. It has the air of somebody hitting a key on their mashup board,
Right.
except before those were anything. Before that
Right.
was anything that existed.
Right. I think it's one of the songs that holds up the best as far as like, I mean, I don't like saying the word holds up because it's comparing something old to something current. Maybe I should say it's the one that is the most comparable to like modern EDM. And so if you were to have to give a song to somebody who only listens to that and say, this is a good song, it would be this one. It has more like really powerful dance sound to it.
Yeah, it sounds very disco, and I also think that just the name Live at Domino's does a lot to sort of contextualize it, because Live at blank is such a... I mean, this album was made in 2000, or it came out in 2000. 2001?
2000.
No, it's 2000. And that feels like such a 1940s to 1980s thing of like, you know, now playing Frank Sinatra live at the Grand Emporium or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, just that name, that style of someone is live at X kind of seems to have died out by the 90s, and obviously by the 2000s and 2020s now, that's just gone.
I can't help but picture these DJs jamming at a pizza place. I don't think it's spelled the same way, but yeah, it's like, I don't think it's spelled the same as Domino's the restaurant, but
Domino's the restaurant has no E.
Yeah.
Because pizza doesn't have an E, so Domino's can't have an E.
Pizza doesn't have an O. Oh wait, I forgot pizza.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's also this really cool part with like a theremin sound almost that kind of jumps in and out. Towards the end of the song, it like really starts heavily fading everything in and out, almost like you're going under and above water.
Yeah.
And I think Live at Domino's is like I said, it's the climax of the album. It's the last hurrah, sort of the all-out end of the fireworks show. Before Little Journey, before Extra Kings, which acts as just sort of a denouement.
Yeah.
And yeah, Extra Kings also has like a sort of sound like somebody's adjusting a radio dial.
Yeah, I like Extra Kings a lot because it starts very pretty, but it also has a lot of, it sounds like track reversal about a minute in, and I think that could be kind of contextualizing the palindromic nature of the album as a whole, because the album as a whole is palindromic. If you listen to it once, or not palindromic,
cyclical,
yeah, cyclical works. If you listen to the last song, it flows directly into the first song.
Does it? I've never actually tried.
I believe it does. I've listened to it as it has.
Right. Well, so one important thing is that the song ends with a sample of somebody saying, I try, but I just can't forget you ever since the day I met you. Or is it the day I left you?
I think it's the day I left you. That's right. What I have.
So it directly calls back to the start of the album and the name of the album.
Yeah.
Which I think. Oh yeah.
I also want to say that is actually, I want to say that's only in the special edition. I don't know if that's in the original. The
Try But I Just Can't Forget You.
Yeah.
That's in the final version.
Okay, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I never noticed it until I listened to the special edition version. So that makes sense that it would be in the normal one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a perfect bookend to the album because, you know, it's Since I Left You, And so it's like we're seeing this person sort of like at the start it's just saying the world is blue, and at the end it's saying that like they've tried to forget but they just can't forget. It's like beyond like noticing that they have a problem and into like trying to solve the problem or work on it.
And failing, notably.
Yeah, because they can't forget. Yeah, so the sort of concept album style, I mean, it's not super prominent, but I think there are a lot of remaining sort of examples leading to it. There's a pretty big focus on travel, not just in the second half, but like Flight Tonight is probably the most obvious one.
Flight Tonight is pretty obvious. Radio could also be, calling to like traveling with the radio on.
Right. And then also the De Niro sample that was originally in Diners Only, Diners Only. It says like, before we take off, would you like anything to drink? So that's from a movie where he's on a plane.
Yeah.
And then of course there's Pablo's Cruise, like we said, which is literally a cruise boat sound.
Literally just a big foghorn.
Right. Yeah. I think the original plan was to have sort of the 7 continents represented, and Frontier Psychiatrist and With My Baby both act as sort of North America as a whole.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of see like the sitar going into Electricity as like either Asia or like Central Asia, West Asia?
Eurasia,
you know what I mean.
effectively.
Sort of the area with like India and going north.
Yeah, Stay Another Season has like the
very
Latin American feel.
Yeah. So you can kind of see some through lines. Dexta is French, I believe, and the rap in Flight Tonight has a little bit of French, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Anyways, yeah, it's like there's elements of it, but it's not super prominent. But the references to travel are still there. But also what I think is more interesting as a through line is the dreamlike feel to it. So like they kept in the crackles and pops of the records they sampled. They didn't do any sort of like noise reduction or cleaning up the sounds.
Yeah,
it really gives age to the samples.
I don't know, like, I wouldn't say it was strictly intentional. It might have just been them working with what they had, but like it has this air of a sort of love letter to the 20th century, since like the 1900s is about when the West died, but then there's the 1930s to 50s of the movie soundtrack / sort of some of the thematic components, but then it has the 60s to 80s as far as the actual musical components with disco. And since it was released in the year 2000, it feels like it is kind of looking back on nostalgia for that century.
Oh, I totally forgot one more reference to the voyage journey theme.
Yes.
Is that so the movie Club Med is sampled a bunch of times throughout the album, and that's a movie about people going to like an island resort. The Get a Drink, Have a Good Time Now, Welcome to Paradise from Since I Left You, the Thank You for Coming Out This Evening on Stay Another Season, and the I Would Say Bon Voyage on Little Journey are all from that movie. So there's another sort of reference to like going on a trip to find somebody you love.
Yeah.
But yeah, so back with like the dreaminess, they've talked about how like they kind of like the ethereality of using these unknown samples, which I totally agree. Like the fact that there are samples that people just don't know how they exist, or not how they exist, but what they're from, makes them feel ghost-like in a way.
Yeah.
Or like I said, dreamlike. Like it's the subconscious of pop culture and music. Like these are the thoughts that have kind of rested for a while.
It feels like the kind of thing where you find an old dusty record in your grandpa's basement and you just put it on wondering what it is.
Yeah. And that's sort of the heart of what Plunderphonics started as, especially with other artists like DJ Shadow, is that sort of feeling of like literally popping open a crate of records and playing them.
Yeah.
As far as like the dreaminess, I feel like Tonight is also a very good example of that feeling of like being half asleep or being fully asleep. It's like the hanging on having no sample or no like instruments playing or like just the vocals playing really lets those imperfections stick out more.
Yeah.
And then of course the album ends in the second half with an alarm clock on like 5 songs.
Yeah.
Also just the crossfading itself sort of feels like the feeling of thoughts floating in and out of like a dream. You know?
It is.
Like,
it is very stream of consciousness.
yeah, it's like the samples kind of fade in and fade out with this sort of mistiness to it, a sort of fogginess. As you hear brief glimpses, and then they pass out, and then they come back, pass out. Yeah, and that's like, I feel like it's very interesting to me how the sort of dream theme and the theme of like a journey coincide. It almost feels fantastical in a way. Like I could see this as a soundtrack to like a Victor Hugo novel. Is it Victor Hugo I'm thinking of, the sci-fi writer? Journey to the Center of the Earth, 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
Because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't read books.
We were in Trivia Bowl.
I mean, yeah.
But
guess
yeah,
how many book things I got right.
So that's just sort of the feeling it gives me a lot of the time is like, if it is a journey, it's not quite on Earth or not quite the Earth we're familiar with. If it is a dream, then it's a dream of something very familiar.
Yeah.
Almost vaporwavy at times.
Yeah, that's actually a really good through line in that like it's an album of nostalgia, but it's an album of nostalgia for something that didn't really exist, but at the same time is made up from culture that did. It's nostalgic for these highlights of a culture that we will never have again, but we also kind of never strictly had. And that's not a bad thing. It's not like rose-tinted glasses, oh, the 80s were horrible. Like, they were, but it's not actually about the 80s themselves. It's not about the actual 1940s or 50s or the actual frontier. It's about this Americana-centric vibe that you get from all of these ideas.
Yeah, like it's like vaporwave is the idealized version of nostalgia for the 80s and 90s. Similarly, this is idealized nostalgia for like the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just sort of a bit about the Avalanches after this album released. They released the album Wildflower, which was their, follow-up album in 2016. So, it took 16 years to actually finish their second album. Their first single off it, Frankie Sinatra, was the first music they released in 16 years since I Left You. Since I Left You. Wildflower was really interesting because it had a lot more like celebrity features on it. It had like collabs with like MF Doom, Danny Brown, Father John Misty, Biz Markie, that's his name. And so it's a very different feeling, but also they've said that they don't want to just do the same thing again, which I can totally understand.
I would honestly even say a little bit for the better. Having only really listened to Frankie Sinatra, I feel like the evolution of their style to incorporate more direct lyrics in addition to their sort of Plunderphonics style works very well. It works honestly a little bit better than some of the songs on Since I Left You. Not all of them. But
I was just gonna say, it reminds me of like a Doom album, like Mad Villain or Danger Mouse.
Yeah.
Or Danger Doom, I mean. where it's just like it has the feeling of, you know, the same sample driven stuff, but with, you know, lyrics to it, I guess, with punch. And not all of it is guest features as well. Though during that time, the Darren Seltman left the group. It seems pretty much that he wasn't able to. He had to get, you know, another job.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's just Robbie Charter and Tony de Blasio.
Yeah.
Their third album, We Will Always Love You, releases December 2020. So by the time you hear this, it should already be out. And by the time we're recording this, it's like a week out. So, a week until it comes out.
So let's go ahead and throw our predictions out.
They've already released like 7 songs from the album. And they've also really heavily said like the inspiration for the album. But I'm going to pretend I didn't read that, and I'm going to assume that it is going to be themed after the dinosaur playground at Animal Kingdom.
Yeah, I think that the 3 tracks that are just the sound of like hard construction work while children are playing in your left channel is really, I think it says a lot about society.
So that reminds me actually of completely unrelated of the band or the artist Buckethead, who has a song in Guitar Hero 3, made another very ridiculous guitar song called Roller Coaster Track Repair. And the first time I heard the name, I was like, wait, so you're just playing a Guitar Hero chart of somebody with like a jackhammer? And so I really want true Roller Coaster Track Repair now. But that's neither here nor there. You know, a lot of people that use a lot of samples have said that the Avalanches are an inspiration. They're very unique in that regard. They're not quite as prominent in like mashup legacy, I guess, the mashup canon. Though there was one song during the Siva Gunner K-Fad 2 takeover that had a sample from Since I Left You, which I was just like, yes, they did it finally. But no, yeah, I just think like the Avalanches are something that's hard to stack up to, because I think part of what makes them so unique is them doing it first and doing it well. Yeah. But I think it's also a good thing that they're hard to stack up to, because I think it's worth like trying new things. The Avalanches made the album not because they were trying to mimic somebody else, but because they were messing around with technology in a way that nobody else had. And I think there's a lot of music nowadays that has that same blood of like using technology in a way that nobody else is.
Yeah, I just think that, I guess for small closing thoughts, it's hard to stack up to the Avalanches, but at the same time, it's kind of like they're playing a different game. And I think that's good. I think that, you know, the like you said, the fact that the Avalanches was doing something completely different is one, like, it inspired a lot of stuff that was also completely different from them.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately, I think, the best takeaway is that, like, you can certainly be inspired.
Doggy.
Thank you, Deity. You can certainly be inspired, but, you know, making your own thing is kind of the best thing you can do with what you want to create.
Right. A few shout outs. I want to shout out the Frontier Psychiatrist Reanimated project, which released on the 20th anniversary of the album. It's, if you don't know what a reanimated is, it's when a bunch of animators and artists recreate a video shot for shot using their own styles. And so like every few seconds it'll jump to another animator's style. It's really well made, a really good tribute to the album and the song. Also, if you like this sort of music, I'd have to recommend RJD2 or DJ Shadow, who are also like pretty well-known Plunderphonics artists, and I guess Fatboy Slim as well. C2C, as in the letter C, the number 2, the letter C, if you like the scratching on Frontier Psychiatrist specifically. They're like some of the best like turntablist artists. And then Kids and Explosions, if you want something that's also like really sample heavy and really transformative, but like completely different from the Avalanches, and also catchy. But yeah, I'm yeah. So those are my main like. You should check those out. My recs.
I unfortunately cannot say who you should check out specifically, because I am actually not terribly versed in this. I literally just Googled C2C because that's sort of my shit. And I want to listen to more of it. I like turntabling.
Yeah.
I want it now.
So yeah, other than that, I think that about wraps up the episode.
Yeah, I overall, you should absolutely give the album a listen. Just make sure you skip tonight because it'll bring you out of it.
Or do if you just want something weird.
That's also true.
or don't skip it. Do listen if you want something weird.
Also,
this is like my second or first favorite album.
Well, I would never encourage anybody to do anything illegal. If you are in a state where it is illegal to do some kind of cannabinoid substances, this feels like the kind of thing that would be extremely nice with them, with certain influences in your body.
Yeah, like insulin for me.
Yeah, insulin.
Right. So you can follow me on Twitter at MattCraigGaming. You can check out my other podcast, Board Game Bros, at bgbcast.com. And also you can follow us on Twitter at NetSurferPro and on Facebook at NetSurferPro. If you follow us on Twitter, you can get little teasers for our next upcoming episodes.
And you can find me specifically on Twitter at Galen Wilson. The O in Wilson is a 0.
I think this is going to be the last episode in December, and so I do want to mention sort of our theme for January, because we're already going through with a theme month. Second month of the podcast, always go for a theme month, second month.
Yes. It is not only on trend, it should hopefully get us that sweet SEO.
Yes, because all of January we will be talking about Flash, as in Macromedia Flash, Adobe Flash, Rest in Peace Flash, Flash
R.I.P.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about various games and media in Flash that will hopefully not be lost forever to the aether.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully we'll be talking about it there, but there are archive projects, so we aren't going to, have to just talk about them from memories of years ago.
Yep. All right.
But, yeah. We hope to see you next time.
See ya.